All right, this is an equation for an exponential function. It is the most basic equation, but let's break down the pieces. A is the initial value. So that means whatever you start with. It's usually times 0, where this y value is a, whatever we're starting with. And that's not always the case, but for what I'm about to teach with my class, that's the case. All right, b is the factor, or what you multiply by. A little bit harder to tell, but that's what you multiply by. X is your input, and it is an exponent. That's why this is an exponential equation. And y would be your output. So we'll use this equation use this formula, I guess, to write equations that are exponential equations. All right, here we're given the point 0.03 and 375, and we're asked to write an exponential equation. I know that the formula is y equals a times b to the x. And so the goal using these 2 points would be to find a and to find b. If you remember, a is the initial value. So that means at time 0, that's our initial value. So for this problem, we automatically know that a is 3. Okay, so we're going to use this second point, x and y, to solve for b. So we're going to plug in x for 3, y for 375. So we've got 375 equals 3 times b cubed. This 3 comes from our initial value. This 3 comes from this problem because we plugged it in for x. And then we're going to solve for b. Before we take care of the exponent, we need to take care of the coefficient, or the initial value. So I'm going to divide by 3. 375 divided by 3 is 125. We're left with b cubed on this side. The opposite of cubing something is cube rooting. So I'm going to cube root this side, cube root this side. So we've got b equals the cube root of 125. So we're trying to think of a number times a number times a number that gives you 125, or you can use your calculator using cube root, and we get 5. So after all this work, nothing was really too hard. We need to write the equation. So y equals a. We found that our a was 3 times b to the x. And this is our answer. Sometimes you'll see it with the b in parentheses. All right, we need to write an exponential equation for this problem. So we start with the formula y equals a times b to the x. A is the initial value. This problem gave us the initial value is 15, and we know it's initial because the x is 0. So I can rewrite the equation with 15 instead of a. So we've got y equals 15 times b to the x. And then we're going to use 1 for x, 12 for y to solve for b. So what that'll look like is 12 instead of y equals 15 times b to the 1 instead of x. This problem's not too hard because b to the 1 is just b. So all we need to do to solve for b is divide by 15. So we get that b is equal to 12 over 15. This can simplify. They both divide by 3. And we get 4 over 5. The question wasn't what is b, the question was write an equation, so we need to take this 4/5 and plug it in for b. So the final answer would be y equals a, which was 15 from the original problem, times b, which we found to be 4/5, to the x. All right, we need to write an exponential equation between the points 0, -2, and -1, -4. The formula for exponential equations is y equals a times b to the x. A is the initial value. And in the problem, they gave us that the initial value is -2. We know that this is the initial value because the x is 0. So instead of a, I'm going to sub in -2. So what that'll look like is y equals -2 times b to the x. We need to find b, and so we're going to use -1 for x, -4 for y, and we're going to solve for b. So when I plug in y, I get -4 equals -2 times b. When I sub in x, I get -1. All right, so we're trying to solve for b. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of that -2. So I'm going to divide by -2. -4 divided by -2 is +2 equals b to the -1. It's a little bit tricky to get rid of the -1, and so I'm going to make it into a fraction. If you remember from exponent rules, you have to have positive exponents, and to do that, you bring it to the bottom. So what this looks like is 2 equals 1 over b to the +1. You don't really need the +1, and the reason why you put a 1 on top is if you take that b down, there would be nothing left on top. So now you can't really solve for b if it's on the bottom, and so we need to move it to the top. So we're going to multiply everything by b on top. So I've got 2b here, and I've got 1b over b here. So I've got 1 times b over b. Notice here b divided by b cancels out to 1. Divide by 2. So b equals 1/2. Now you probably could have seen from right here that b equals 1/2, but if you couldn't, this is the process to get 1/2. All right, so the problem asks us to write the equation, not to find b, so we need to finish. We're going to have y equals a, we found from the original, -2. B is what we're multiplying by, we discovered was 1/2 to the x.